a very warm welcome to the Analyst dated 19th May 2025, brought to you by Vajiram and Ravi, wherein we will be covering the 7 set of current affairs issues which have featured in today's newspaper. And the handout of this very discussion is available in the description below for your future reference. Beginning with the analysis section, firstly we'll try to understand that why the government is planning to bring crucial amendments when it comes to the laws which regulate the atomic energy generation in India. Why the Indian government is making a transition towards the nuclear energy and what are the challenges with respect to the same. Moving on to the second topic, herein we'll try to look into the issue of illegal immigration in India, the reasons for the same, the challenges which the illegal immigrants pose to national security, and what all steps the government has taken and what all steps it needs to take in order to effectively address the menace of illegal immigration in India. Moving on to the simplified section, herein we'll be covering the 5 set of current affairs issues in the most simple manner possible, and we'll also be doing the necessary value addition which would be relevant for your upcoming prelims examination. So stay tuned. So beginning with the first topic, which is related to India's transition towards nuclear energy. This particular topic is relevant from our GS paper 3 perspective, especially the renewable energy. Why we are discussing about renewable energy today? Because in the upcoming monsoon session, it is likely that the government would be bringing amendments in the 2 prominent acts which govern the India's atomic energy sector. What are these 2 acts? One is your Civil Liability for Nuclear Damage Act 2010 and another one is your Atomic Energy Act of 1962. Now, let's just first understand why there is a need to amend these acts. For that, we need to understand what these act actually deals with. So first act is your Atomic Energy Act of 1962. According to this particular act, it is only the state-owned companies like the Nuclear Power Corporation of India Limited or the National Thermal Power Corporation Limited. They only have the right to operate nuclear power plants in India. The private sector is not allowed to own the nuclear power plants in India. And that is the reason the government is planning to bring the amendment. In what lines we are planning to bring the amendment? We are planning that we'll enable the private sector also to own the nuclear power plants. And at a later stage, we'll allow the foreign players also to operate the nuclear power plants in India. But at a later stage. Initially, we are going to give a boost to the private sector. Then another prominent act that we are going to discuss is Civil Liability for Nuclear Damage Act of 2010. Now, if a nuclear damage happens, who is going to provide the compensation to the victims of such disaster? So, according to this act, we have placed the liabilities on the operators. So, operators are basically these state-owned companies, and these operators have to provide up to 1,500 crore as compensation to the victims. Under this particular act, we have also placed the liability on the equipment vendors who are supplying the equipment to the state-owned company's operator. In case of a nuclear damage, the liability would also be placed on the supplier. Why is it so? The reason is, in the Bhopal gas tragedy, what the government figured out that one of the reasons of this Bhopal gas tragedy was defective equipment being supplied by the equipment vendors. And that is the reason under this particular act, we have placed the liabilities on the equipment suppliers as well. So, when it comes to nuclear damage, the operators can ask for the compensation from the equipment suppliers in case it is found that the equipment that they supplied was defective or the personnel who is associated with the suppliers, it has provided a substandard service. So in that case, we will be holding the equipment suppliers also liable to pay the compensation to the victims. And this is the reason the government is planning to bring the amendment with respect to this particular act also. So on what lines the government is planning to bring the amendments? The government is planning that we will be capping the liabilities when it comes to the equipment suppliers. Okay, and the government would also be putting in place some time frame when this liability clause would be coming in force when it comes to the equipment supply. Now, let's just look into what are the major nuclear power plants which are operating in India. You can get a prelims question with respect to the same. So, in UP, you have Narora, Atomic Power Station. In Rajasthan also, we have one nuclear power plant. In Gujarat, we have Kakrapur. In Maharashtra, we have Tarapur. In Karnataka, we have Kaiga. In Tamil Nadu, we have Kundakulam. Now, The next aspect that we need to understand is why there was a need for this amendment. We have understood the regulatory landscape, why there was a need for the amendment. Now, when you talk about the Civil Liability for Nuclear Damage Act, the problem with this act is, when it comes to the operator, it has put in the ceiling what amount the operators have to provide. That is 1,500 crore. But the act is silent with respect to the liability when it comes to the equipment suppliers. So, the equipment suppliers have raised this concern that unconditional, high amount of compensation can be asked from them by the operators in case of a nuclear damage. Because the act is silent with regard to the maximum compensation which the equipment vendors have to give, as we have in place when it comes to the operators. This is the major reason why the foreign players like GE, Hitachi, Westinghouse and Areva, they are not ready to supply the nuclear material and the equipment when it comes to India, because of the supplier liability clause. And this is the reason the government is planning to bring a cap when it comes to the supplier liability under the Civil Liability for Nuclear Damage Act. This would give a boost to foreign investment when it comes to the nuclear energy sector in India. Then another issue with this particular act is, it places the burden on ultimately the taxpayer. Now, what we have studied under the act, that it is the operator which is going to give the compensation to the victims, and these operators are basically whom? The state-owned companies. So ultimately, from where these state-owned companies are going to give the compensation to the victims? Basically from the taxpayer money. So this increases additional burden on the taxpayers also. And lastly, this particular act, which is Civil Liability for Nuclear Damage Act, it is silent that who is going to bear the financial burden of scientific disposal of nuclear waste, which is generated in case of a nuclear disaster, like what we witnessed during the Chernobyl disaster in Ukraine. This led to generation of huge nuclear waste. But the act is silent that who is ultimately going to bear the financial burden of scientific disposal of this nuclear waste, okay, which is a very costly affair. So that is the reason the government is planning to bring the amendment with respect to these laws. Now, another aspect that we need to understand is why India is focusing upon renewable energy sector. First and foremost, to achieve our net zero emission goal, which we have planned to achieve by 2070. What is this net zero emission? Does it mean that we are not going to produce greenhouse gases at all? No. Net zero emission basically implies that if I am releasing or emitting X amount of greenhouse gases into the atmosphere, I need to reduce the exactly same amount of greenhouse gases from the atmosphere. Okay. So the net contribution of greenhouse gases would be 0. So in order to meet this goal of net zero emission by 2070, we need to focus upon renewable energy. And that is the reason in this year budget, the government has put in place an ambitious target that we will be putting in place 100 gigawatt of nuclear capacity by 2047. Another reason being, in order to achieve energy security. Now we all are aware of this thing, that urbanization is going to increase, global warming is also increasing. So because of this, you require higher energy, and as the industrialization is also going to increase, because of that also we are going to witness an increase in energy demand. Roughly the energy demand would be witnessing an increase of 6 to 8% on an annual basis. And this get amplified because of the climate change issues as well. So in this slide, nuclear energy is a step in the right direction. Why? Because when you talk about other renewable energy like wind, like solar energy, they face the issue of grid instability. Okay, you cannot generate solar energy throughout the day. You cannot ensure wind energy generation throughout the day. But when you talk about nuclear power plants, they can operate 24/7. So this enables us to meet the increasing energy demands, and at the same time, it also provides us with grid stability. Then another reason why India is focusing is in order to reduce its import dependence when it comes to the fossil fuels, when it comes to natural gas. Because whenever there is fluctuation in the oil prices, we witness an increase in current account deficit. So if we focus upon the nuclear energy sector, we can address this current account deficit. Okay. Then if we focus upon this nuclear energy generation, we will be able to effectively use or leverage the strategic international partnerships. In 2005, India entered into a civil nuclear agreement with USA, which provided India access to uranium. But what was the problem? Why we are still not able to leverage this particular agreement? Remember, civil liability for nuclear damage. The suppliers are not ready to supply you the equipments or the materials because there is supplier liability clause. So if we bring out the amendments, if the government is going to introduce the amendments that we have discussed, India would be able to leverage this particular agreement. And India has also entered into an agreement with France, wherein we are developing the technology to develop better nuclear power plants, okay, like small modular reactors. Then it is also going to give a boost to green jobs creation. If you talk about International Atomic Energy Agency, according to this agency, the nuclear energy has the ability to generate 25% more jobs per unit of electricity generated as compared to the wind energy. So this particular sector has a higher potential to generate more jobs. And if you focus upon nuclear energy sector, obviously the jobs would be created for maintenance of power plants, for operation of power plants, etc. But although we have discussed the significance of nuclear energy sector, why India is unable to tap the potential of this particular sector? First and foremost reason is lack of foreign investment. Again, the reason is Civil Liability for Nuclear Damage Act, wherein we have incorporated supplier liability clause. So that is the reason what you see that nuclear energy contributes only 3% of the total energy or electricity generated in India if you talk about the figures of 2022-23. But we have higher ambition. The Indian government has planned that by 2050, 25% of our electricity would be generated by nuclear energy. But where do we stand right now? Okay, so there's a long way to go. Another challenge is resilient supply of uranium. Because when you talk about domestic production of uranium, it is roughly 1 to 2% of the global production. So we are majorly reliant upon the imports when it comes to uranium. I told you we have entered into a civil nuclear agreement with the USA. But the problem is the reactors which are going to use the imported uranium, they have to comply with the safeguards of International Atomic Energy Agency. This increases the compliance burden when it comes to India and the nuclear power plant operators. Then there's a negative public perception when it comes to the nuclear energy because we have witnessed the nuclear disaster, example Fukushima disaster that we witnessed in Japan, and that is the reason we witnessed huge protest from the people when the government was planning to put in place Kundukulam nuclear power plant in Tamil Nadu. Then, as I told you, whenever there would be a nuclear damage, huge amount of radioactive waste would be generated. But when you talk about India, we don't have a scientific mechanism in place to effectively deal with the radioactive waste that is generated. So that is another issue. Then we are majorly dependent upon the foreign technology. For example, we are collaborating with Russia when it comes to development of Kundakulam nuclear power plant, and we are collaborating with France when it comes to Jaipur nuclear power plant. So this basically impacts Atmanirbhar Bharat mission, okay? Attaining self-reliance when it comes to nuclear energy generation. We are majorly dependent upon the foreign technology. This is also because of the low R&D when it comes to indigenous nuclear energy technology. Now, what needs to be done in order to improve the situation? First and foremost, the amendments that we have already discussed needs to be brought in a effective time frame so that we can give a boost to foreign investment when it comes to the nuclear generation. Then we need to enhance the indigenous technology and R&D, okay? So the developments that we have done when it comes to the development of small modular reactors, that need to be given boost by the government. And in order to get the necessary finance for the same, the government can issue sovereign green bonds. okay, to provide adequate boost to the R&D when it comes to indigenous technology in this particular sector. Then we need to strengthen the supply of uranium. For that, we need to give a boost to domestic production of uranium also. And we need to enter into collaboration like we have entered with USA. We need to enter into collaboration with Russia and other players which can provide us a resilient uranium supply in the future. Then we need to effectively manage the nuclear waste. In this line, we can learn from Finland and Sweden. Okay, they have effective sustainable practice to effectively deal with the radioactive waste which is generated from nuclear power plants. And lastly, we need to fast track the regulatory approvals by putting in place a specialized agency which would be monitoring the nuclear power plants, effectively looking into the safeguard procedure, whether they are there in place, and we need to provide single window clearance when it comes to the nuclear power plants, okay, their installation. And this particular dedicated agency could also collaborate with the state government with respect to development of the nuclear energy sector. Lastly, you can conclude an answer if you're writing it on nuclear energy that India need to focus upon this nuclear energy sector because it is in line with Sustainable Development Goal 7, which talks about affordable and clean energy, and it is also in alignment with the Paris Agreement. That's all that we have to discuss with regard to this particular topic. I have framed a practice question for you, so do practice this question and let us know your answers in the comment section. With this, let's move on to the next topic. Now, beginning with the second topic, which is related to the issue of illegal immigration in India. This particular topic you can relate with GS paper 3. What is the context? So recently, the Ministry of Home Affairs has set a 30-day deadline within which the states and the union territories, they have to verify the credentials of people who are suspected to be illegal immigrants from Bangladesh and Myanmar. Now, let's look into what further directions were given by the Ministry of Home Affairs to states and union territories. So, this ministry has directed the states and union territories that they have to establish sufficient number of district level detention centers, which would be holding the individuals against whom the deportation proceedings are still pending. Then the states and the union territories, they have to maintain a record of the illegal Bangladeshi nationals and the Rohingyas, which they have handed over to border forces or to the coast guards for deportation. And on 15th of every month, they have to give a report to the center with respect to the same. And the Bureau of Immigration, they have to publish a list of the deportees on a public portal. This data would be shared with Election Commission of India, Unique Identity Authority of India and Ministry of External Affairs. Why? So that such individuals should not be issued with voter ID cards, Aadhaar cards, and they should not be issued passports also. And if they have been issued, then it would be done away with. And the same directions have been given to Director General of the Border Security Forces and Assam Rifles, that they have to prevent illegal immigration into India. Now, what is illegal immigration? Let's just understand this first of all. So, illegal immigration basically refers to trans-boundary migration of people from one country to another without valid documents or using illegal means. When you talk about India, how do we define this illegal immigration? So if you go by the Citizenship Act, an illegal immigrant is basically a foreigner who enter into India either without valid documents or passport, or the person had the valid documents or the passport, but that person has stayed in India beyond the permitted time period. In both the cases, we will say that the X person is an illegal immigrant in India. Now, if you go by the report of Home Ministry, one of the major reasons of illegal immigration in India is the porous nature of India-Bangladesh border. And majority of the illegal immigration we are witnessing in the state of Assam and West Bengal. Now, let's dive deeper into the reasons why India is witnessing huge influx of illegal immigrants. First and foremost reason is lack of better livelihood opportunity in our neighboring countries, because the industrial sector, when it comes to the neighboring countries like Pakistan, Afghanistan, Bangladesh, they are not that much well developed what we witness in case of India. So in order to get better livelihood opportunities, the people from these neighboring countries, they enter into India. Then another reason is political instability in our neighboring countries. For example, after the military coup in 2021 in Myanmar, we have witnessed influx of Rohingyas in the state of West Bengal. Then once the Taliban took over the control over Afghanistan, in that backdrop also we witnessed huge influx of illegal immigrants into India. Then in order to avoid religious or ethnic persecution also, the people enter into India by adopting illegal means. But in order to protect these religious minorities, we have come up with the Citizenship Amendment Act, wherein we will be providing the Indian citizenship to religious minorities who basically are the members of Hindu, Sikh, Buddhist, Jain, Parsi or Christian communities. And they are coming from these three countries, that is Pakistan, Bangladesh and Afghanistan, and they should have entered into India before 31st December 2014. Only then they would be eligible to get the Indian citizenship. This is basically to protect the religious minorities who are facing religious and ethnic persecution in their respective countries. This is also one of the prominent reasons of illegal immigration in India. Then overpopulation, like what we witness in Bangladesh. Then we witness huge influx of illegal immigrants from Bangladesh. Another reason is the natural disasters. And lastly, as the Ministry of Home Affairs in its annual report has also pointed out, one of the major reasons of huge influx of illegal immigrants is porous border and lack of border fencing. Okay, because there is a tough terrain because of the mountains and all. So we are not able to effectively track the immigration in India. Now, what are the impacts? Why we need to address this issue of illegal immigration? Because of illegal immigration, we witness social tensions. Why? Because of influx of illegal immigrants, what we witness is the indigenous community, they become a minority. And that is the reason previously we have witnessed, issues in the state of Assam, and that ultimately led to signing of Assam Accord. Then they can also lead to terrorist activity. Like when you talk about the Mumbai attacks that we witnessed in 2008, the terrorists basically entered via sea route. Okay, so border management is one of the issue because of which we can witness these terrorist related issues as well. Then there is increase in human trafficking, and this has been validated by the data given by National Crime Record Bureau as well as Ministry of Women and Child Development. What is happening? Because of poverty in our neighboring countries like Bangladesh, etc., the parents actually sell their daughters, okay, to the human traffickers. And because of this, what we are witnessing, rise in crimes in India. Then, as the Muslims in the state of Assam, they are facing threat. Why? Because they are perceived to be as illegal immigrants, and that has led to radicalization among the Muslims, and ultimately this has led to formation of a militant organization, that is Muslim United Liberation Tigers of Assam. So again, this is adding to internal security issues. Then because of illegal immigrants, India witnessed resource strain also, because these illegal immigrants, if they are able to get the Aadhaar, then they can take the benefits of social welfare schemes, because variety of the social welfare schemes are provided by the government based on Aadhaar identification. That is the reason the Ministry of Home Affairs has given the direction that when it comes to data with regard to illegal immigrants, we have to share it with the Unique Identification Authority of India, so that we can do away with these Aadhaar card which these illegal immigrants are having. Okay, so now this particular money which the government is using to provide welfare schemes to illegal immigrants, the same we can use to provide welfare schemes to our Indian citizens. And if you go by this report given by NSSO in 2022, what we have found out in its study, that wherever we see higher concentration of illegal immigrants, we witness a drop in wages when it comes to unskilled labor. Why? You need to understand this. When it comes to illegal immigrants, they majority of the time, they don't have, effective or valid documents, and ultimately they are forced to work in the informal sector. And we know that in India, more than 90% of the workforce is employed in the informal sector. So when you witness huge influx of illegal immigrants, ultimately the wages when it comes to the informal sector or when it comes to unskilled labor would witness a reduction. Okay, so this severely impacts the economic interest of Indian citizens as well. Now, what all steps the government has taken to address this particular issue? So, we have strengthened our border security. How? By increasing the fencing when it comes to borders, international borders. We have put in place a comprehensive integrated border management system wherein we are leveraging the technology for enhanced border monitoring. And we are also enhancing the border surveillance. So regular patrolling and anti-tunneling exercise is being carried out by the security forces, okay, to stop illegal infiltration. Then we also have the policy framework in place. We have put in place a national register of citizens under which the government is planning to effectively identify who is citizen of India and who is an illegal immigrant. Okay, and accordingly they would be deported to their respective country. Then we also have Foreigners Act 1946, which basically deal with the entry and staying of the foreigners in India. So under this act, the burden of proof, you need to understand this, the burden of proof will be on the individual. The individual has to prove that this X individual is a citizen of India. Okay, it would not be on the authorities. So we have this Foreigners Act also, and in 2019 an amendment was brought in with respect to this particular act, which has also given the power to the district magistrate that they can set up a tribunal which would be identifying the illegal immigrants, and accordingly they would be deported to their respective countries. Then recently in the parliament, this Immigration and Foreigners Bill have been introduced, and this bill is planning to repeal 4 existing laws. Okay, these are the 4 existing laws. So it is going to put in place a comprehensive legal framework when it comes to dealing with the foreigners who are entering and staying in India. And according to this particular bill, the educational institutions, the hospitals, they have to contribute with the authorities when it comes to tracking of the foreigners in India. And under this bill, the government can deny the entry to a foreigner when it comes to India on grounds of threat to national security, sovereignty, foreign relations, etc. And stricter penalty would be put in place if a person is found to stay beyond the permitted time period, okay, which its valid documents actually allow. Now, what more needs to be done in order to effectively address this menace of illegal immigration? So we need to enhance the border security, we need to enhance the road infrastructure in the border areas, then we need to increase the fencing of our porous borders, because one of the major reasons is porous international borders. So we need to increase the fencing, and we can use the technology to effectively do the border surveillance. Then there should be enhanced coordination when it comes to the central and the state agencies when it comes to dealing with this particular issue. And on this particular front, we can learn from European Union's Frontex agency, which is enabling the collaboration between the center and the state agencies. So we also need to learn from them. Then we can strengthen the diplomatic cooperation with our neighboring countries. And on this front, we can learn from USA and Mexico, which have entered into a bilateral cooperation on border security. So they are sharing the intelligence also. And we can also leverage our regional platforms like BIMSTEC, like SAARC, okay, to basically strengthen the diplomatic cooperation with our neighboring countries when it comes to dealing with the border security challenges, especially the issue of illegal immigrants. Okay, so intelligence sharing could be given a boost by using these regional forums. And lastly, we need to reform the legal framework. We need to make sure that when it comes to illegal immigrants, their human rights should not be violated, and we need to strengthen this particular bill which has been recently being introduced in the parliament, and effective passage of this particular bill within the limited time frame should be ensured. That's all that we need to cover when it comes to this particular topic. I have framed a practice question for you. So do practice this question and let us know your answers in the comment section. With this, let's move on to the simplified section. Now, beginning with the simplified section, an editorial has appeared in The Hindu wherein the writer is pointing out that how the generative artificial intelligence tool are upsetting the copyright laws in India. This particular topic is relevant from a prelims perspective, especially the polity section. Now, if you talk about the copyright laws currently, they prevent unauthorized publication of the copyrighted content. At the same time, according to Copyright Act, when it comes to India, you are allowed to use the copyrighted content for educational purposes. But what is the concern which the writer has pointed out in this era of artificial intelligence? That how these copyright laws are going to deal with prohibiting the AI platforms from using these copyrighted content to train their artificial intelligence tools. Now, when you talk about the AI companies like OpenAI, they use the technology that is called internet scraping. What is this internet scraping? Wherein the AI tool would be using all the publicly available content. Maybe it could be copyright, maybe it could be non-copyrighted content to train its artificial intelligence tool. So this is the reason the writer is pointing out that how the copyright law is going to deal with this emerging issue. How we can prevent these AI companies from using the copyrighted content to train their AI platforms. This is the reason why the Federation of Indian Publishers and the Asian News International has initiated a copyright infringement claim against the OpenAI before the Delhi High Court. And such, cases are also pending in the American court. Now, when you talk about the US, therein the OpenAI has come up with opt-out mechanism. What is this opt-out mechanism? So, OpenAI has clearly stated that if you don't want us to use your copyright content, you can opt out. Okay, you can stop providing the copyright content when it comes to training the AI platform. But the concern is, how do we prevent the training which has been done in the past by using these copyrighted content? Although we can prevent the use of copyrighted content in the future, okay, for training the AI tools, but how do we apply it when it comes to past training? So the writer is pointing out that the issue which the court has to deal with is it technically feasible and practically possible that we can make the AI tools unlearn whatever they have learned by using the copyrighted content? Another issue which the court has to look into is that what happens if a person who is the original creator of a copyright content, this person opts out, okay, when it comes to allowing the AI companies to use his or her copyrighted content to train the AI tools. It could happen that the AI companies still continue to use this copyrighted content, and when it comes to providing the source, it falsely bring out the sources. How the court is going to look into this particular issue? Now, the writer has further pointed out that if we go by this opt-out mechanism, if we allow this, then it is going to negatively impact the development of the emerging AI platforms, which don't have deep pockets like the AI company, like the OpenAI. So the writer has pointed out that another issue which the courts have to look into is that how it creates a level playing field when it comes to AI companies which have deep pockets like OpenAI and the AI emerging platforms which don't have deep pockets. Now, what solution the writer has provided? The writer is basically, tilted towards the AI companies. So the writer has stated that an ex-individual is able to create based on the innovation and creativity done by his or her predecessor. So that is the reason the writer is pointing out that the copyright laws should not affect the access to copyrighted content when it comes to training the AI tools, because that is going to further fuel the creativity in the upcoming future. Okay, let's see what the courts decide when it comes to this particular matter. Now, from a prelims perspective, we need to know certain prelim pointers with regard to Copyright Act. So when you talk about this particular act, it protects the rights of the content creator, and at the same time we allow public access in certain cases. Okay, the exceptions are provided under section 52. So you are allowed to use the copyrighted content without getting the prior permission of the original content creator if you are using that material for doing criticism of that work, or if the government is using that particular content, or if the educational institutions are using that particular content for educational purposes. Okay, the law basically gives the creator or the author the exclusive right to use, reproduce, distribute, perform and display their particular work. But when you talk about the Copyright Act, it protects only the expression and not the idea. So when you talk about Copyright Act in India, it does not protect the idea. What do I mean by this? Let's suppose there is a novel which is based on the story of three friends, okay? If I want to make a movie on the same idea that there's a story of three friends, if I copy the exact plot, dialogues, everything from this particular novel, then that would be infringement of the copyright. But if I just borrow this particular idea that, okay, I also want to make a movie on the story of three friends. I'm not copying the dialogues, I'm not copying the plot which is given in the novel. So in that case, it would not be a violation of copyright. Then when you talk about this Copyright Act, it basically covers the literary work, musical work, artistic work related to films, music, etc. And till what duration the original content creator enjoy these copyright? So in case of literary, music and dramatic works, the copyright is there with the original creator during his lifetime plus 60 years after the death of the original content creator. But when you talk about the films or the sounds, in that case, the copyright is for 60 years right from the publication of that film or that music. That is what that we need to know with regard to this particular topic. Let's move on to the next topic. Now, recently, the NASA has made a statement that we will be likely launching the Axiom-4 mission at around 8th June. Okay. The launch of Axiom-4 would not be possible before 8th June. This particular topic is relevant from a prelims perspective, especially science and technology. So when you talk about this Axiom-4 mission, it was scheduled to be launched in the last week of May. But according to NASA, due to some logistical reason, there has been a delay when it comes to launch of Axiom-4 mission. So when you talk about this Axiom-4 mission, it would be carrying an Indian astronaut named Shubhanshu Shukla, and it would also be having 3 other astronauts from 3 different countries. One from USA, other from Poland and Hungary. Now, when you talk about this Axiom-4 mission, it is operated by a private US space company, that is Axiom Space, in partnership with NASA and SpaceX. Indian participation in this mission is basically a result of the agreement between ISRO and NASA. And when you talk about this particular mission, the astronauts would be traveling in a new Dragon spacecraft which would be built by SpaceX, and it would be launched by Falcon 9 rocket, which again is being developed by SpaceX company. Now, let's note down certain prelim pointers with regard to Axiom-4 mission. So, it is going to be a short duration mission. Why? Because the mission is going to last for approximately 14 days. It also have a long-term vision. What is the long-term vision? Basically, it is planning to put in place world's first commercial space station. We are planning to make a transition from International Space Station to their own independent orbital outpost. So, they are planning to put in place the commercial space station, making a transition from International Space Station. What are the other objectives of the mission? So, it is planning to give a boost to space tourism, especially in the low Earth orbit, which extend till 2000 km from Earth or less than that. Then it is giving boost to international collaboration. As we have seen, the 4 astronauts belong from different countries, India, US, etc. So this reflects what? Growing international interest in space exploration. And lastly, it is going to give a boost to research and development, especially the technological tests which are going to be conducted in the unique microgravity. Microgravity basically is a situation wherein the objects feel weightless because they are in a free fall state. Okay, and it is also enabling us to do the research when it comes to areas like material science, biology, earth observation, etc. Now, what is the significance of this Axiom-4 mission when it comes to India? It is going to further strengthen the collaboration between ISRO and NASA, the space agencies of the 2 countries, and the experience which the Indian astronaut is going to learn from this particular mission, it would be helpful for us to effectively design the Gaganyaan mission, which would be India's first human space flight mission. That's all that we need to know with regard to this particular topic. Let's move on to the next one. Now, New Caledonia is in news. Why? Let's understand this. This particular topic is relevant from a prelims perspective. So, recently, the France authorities, they have put in place a proposal that they would be tweaking the voting rights when it comes to this particular region, New Caledonia. Now, when it comes to this particular region, this has been seized by the France as a penal colony in 1853, and in 1957, France authorities basically granted citizenship to the inhabitants. The original inhabitants were the Kanak people. There was huge struggle for independence when it comes to New Caledonia, and ultimately the two parties, that is the France government and the indigenous people, that is the Kanak people, they entered into an accord, that is No-May Accord in 1998. Through this accord, the authorities when it comes to New Caledonia, they were provided with some sovereignty, okay, some sort of independence when it comes to rule making, because it had its own Congress, and the voting rights were restricted only to long-term resident, that is basically the Kanak people. So this accord was in favor of the indigenous people who were continuously demanding for independence. But what happened over a period of time? 3 referendum took place, 2018, 20 and 21. In all the 3 referendums, this region rejected independence. But why there is an issue then? Because this latest referendum which took place in 2021, in this referendum, the pro-independence party, that is the Kanak and Socialist National Liberation Front, did not participate in this referendum. And that is why the legitimacy of this referendum is being contested. So as the France authorities have bring in this proposal that now the voting rights when it comes to this particular region would not be only restricted to long-term resident, that is the indigenous Kanak people, it would be available to all the other people who are residing in this particular region. But this is not acceptable to pro-independence party, and that has led to riots in this particular region. That is why this place is in news. So in order to resolve this overall situation, the French government has tried to find a third way out. So what is this third way? They are talking about sovereignty in partnership. What do we mean by this? So under this, what the French authorities are going to do, they are going to provide a new institutional status. They are going to give greater autonomy when it comes to certain areas of governance, for example, judiciary, when it comes to this particular region. But they are not going to provide complete independence to this particular region. But this thing is not acceptable to the indigenous people and the pro-independence parties. Okay. Now, let's note down certain film pointers with regard to this particular region. So when you talk about this New Caledonia, it is basically located in southwestern Pacific Ocean, and it is approximately 1,500 kilometers east of Australia. Here you can look into. Now what is the history? We have already discussed that it came under French control in 1853, and because of protest for independence when it comes to this particular region, the French authorities and the indigenous people, they entered into an accord, that is No-May Accord, which promised 3 independence referendum. But in all the 3 referendum, the independence from France was rejected. This idea was rejected. So in all the 3 referendum, the people basically favored being aligned with France, okay, rejecting the idea of complete independence. But this was against the interest of the indigenous people, that is the Kanak people. Now, what is the significance of this particular region for France? So this particular region is important from strategic point of view, as this region is situated in the South Pacific area, and herein we are seeing increased influence of Chinese, and that is the reason France do not want to lose control over this particular region. And then this region also have higher deposits of nickel, which is needed for manufacturing industries. And this region also have ecological significance because the lagoons of New Caledonia has been designated as the World Heritage Site in 2008. Okay, so because this particular area has extensive reef system. That's all that we need to know with regard to this particular topic. Let's move on to the next one. Now, recently the Suez Canal Authority has offered a 15% discount when it comes to transit fee for the cargo ships which would be passing from the Red Sea route. This particular topic is relevant from a film perspective. Now, this discount thing would be coming in force from 15th May, and this would be applicable for the cargo ships which have a minimum capacity of 1,30,000 metric tons. Now, this development has come after the Donald Trump has announced that the Iran-backed Houthi rebels have agreed to a ceasefire when it comes to Red Sea region. But the Iran-backed Houthi rebels have clearly stated that they will continue to target the commercial vessels which have a connection with Israel. Confused? Let's understand the background. Now, we are all aware of the atrocities done by the Israeli government when it comes to Gaza region. So in this backdrop, the Iran-backed Houthi rebels, which are basically situated in Yemen, they started carrying out attacks on the commercial ships which passed from this Red Sea route or the Suez Canal route and which were linked with Israel and its key allies. That is the reason what we witnessed, the revenue which was generated by Suez Canal Authority, that went down because of the security concern, and the ships, instead of going through this Red Sea route, they have to navigate through Cape of Good Hope. Now, what is the importance of this particular region, Suez Canal? So, if you go by the International Monetary Fund data, IMF data, this Suez Canal accounts for 12 to 15% of global trade, 30% of global container traffic, and 9% of the global energy flows. Similar is the case with India. We are heavily reliant on this Red Sea shipping route, and nearly 80% of the volumes when it comes to India passes through the Suez Canal. But because of the attacks being carried out by the Houthi rebels on the commercial vessels, this led to diversion of the ships towards the Cape of Good Hope route. Now, what was the implication of this thing? This increased the travel time by 10 to 14 days. Obviously, if the travel time is increasing, the cost of exporting the goods would also increase, and that we witness with respect to India as well. And the vessels which continue to move from this Red Sea route, for them the war risk insurance premium increased. So in this backdrop, the Suez Canal Authority is ready to offer 15% discount when it comes to transit fee to basically bring back the vessels again to this Red Sea route. But it needs to be looked into that whether this discount would actually bring the ship back again to Red Sea route or not. Now, what we need to know from the point of view of our prelims, certain pointers with regard to Suez Canal. So it is an artificial sea level waterway which connects the Mediterranean Sea with the Red Sea. It is located near the northeastern Egypt, as you can see here, and it spans across the Isthmus of Suez. What is Isthmus? It is basically a thin strip of land which connect two large land masses, and on both the side you have water bodies as well. Okay. Now, if you go back into the history, this waterway was opened for navigation in 1869, and initially it was under the control of French and British authority, but in 1956 it was nationalized by the Egyptian authorities. Now, going further, you can also expect the prelim questions with regard to the countries which border the Red Sea region. So what are these countries? So we have Egypt, we have Sudan, we have Eritrea, we have Djibouti, Yemen and Saudi Arabia. That's all that we need to know with regard to this particular topic. Let's move on to the next. Now, recently, the Vodafone has went up to the Supreme Court, and it has clearly stated that if they don't get a relief when it comes to adjusted gross revenue dues, they may not be able to continue their operation beyond financial year 2026. This particular topic is relevant from our prelims section, especially the economy. Now, as I have told you, Vodafone has went to the Supreme Court with regard to the AGR dues, and it has clearly stated that if it didn't get the waiver when it comes to the adjusted gross revenue dues, it may not be able to operate beyond financial year 2026, and if this happens, then the market would be turning into a duopoly. Basically, you will be having only two telecom operators, that is Reliance, other one is your Bharti Airtel, okay, which are the major players. When you talk about the Vodafone, they have basically asked for relief when it comes to the interest and penalties when it comes to AGR dues, and they have also asked for a 5-year moratorium. Moratorium basically means a holiday when it comes to repaying the loans. Now, what we need to understand from the perspective of our prelims is, what is this adjusted gross revenue? What is the issue all about? So when you talk about this adjusted gross revenue, it forms the basis for the government to calculate the telecom companies' dues to the government with respect to licensing fee and the spectrum users charges. Now, why there is an issue going on between the telecom operators and the government? If you talk about the telecom companies, they say that when it comes to computation of this adjusted gross revenue, only the revenue which the telecom operators are able to generate from the core telecom services like data services, calling services, that should be taken into account when it comes to computation of AGR. But what the Department of Telecommunication has to say, that when it comes to computation of this adjusted gross revenue, they would not just be taking into account the revenue which the telecom operators are able to generate from core telecom operation, but it would also be including the revenue which the telecom operators are able to generate from non-core sources like profit on sales of fixed asset, sale of scrap, corporate deposit, real estate transactions, etc. Now, let's just look into the history with respect to this AGR. So, firstly, the matter came into picture in 2005, wherein the Cellular Operators Association of India challenged the computation of AGR which was given by Department of Telecommunication. So, the Telecom Dispute Settlement and Appellate Tribunal gave its ruling in 2015, and it basically gave the ruling in favor of telecom companies. What do we mean by this? This ruling stated that AGR should be calculated based on the revenue which is generated by the telecom operators through the core telecom services. Okay, it should exclude the non-core sources. That means you are not allowed to take into account the revenue generated by the telecom operators through non-telecom operations. But when you talk about the Supreme Court, it gave its verdict in 2019, and it basically went with what the Department of Telecommunication has to say. That means AGR would be calculated taking into account the revenue generated from core telecom operation plus the revenue generated from non-core telecom operations. Okay, like the interest and capital gains. Let's see what the Supreme Court will be deciding in this particular matter, as the Bharti Airtel as well as Vodafone has approached the Supreme Court with regard to adjusted gross revenue. That's all that we need to know from today's analyst. Quiz would be coming right up next, so don't forget to practice the quiz and check your knowledge. Till then, keep smiling, keep learning. Have a very nice day, all of you.